Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Mini Masterpiece Watercolor Workshop. In this video, I'm going to be painting this little cabin in the woods. So if you want to see how I did it, stay tuned. Let's get started. All right, everybody. So welcome to the Mini Masterpiece Watercolor Workshop. And today we're going to be playing around with line and wash. And I have to say, I haven't done a lot of line and wash. I've done more just traditional watercolor. So I did a little test run, and this is the, oops, getting rid of my record sign. This is kind of my test run this morning because I wanted to see, I had some ideas in my head and I want to see how they would work out on the paper. So I didn't make you guys complete guinea pigs to my ideas in my head. Sometimes they look really good in my head and not on paper. So we're going to be playing around with that, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what I used for my lines in a second. But I had an idea that I wanted to share with you guys because I haven't brought this up before. I noticed after doing this, I thought, I feel like there's so much of the ground, and I really like the focus to be more on the tree line. And what I will do is take these strips they're just like 2 1/8 inch strips of cardstock, and I make a matting so that I can kind of change up how I have my composition based on how I mat it, because it can change a lot. So what I do is I have these strips, and now you can cut out, if you have a specific size that you like to work with, you can cut out an actual matting that you use. But I have different sizes. I can do it any size because I can mat it. And I just take it to the edges, and then I'll just adjust one of the strips and see how I like it. Like, I like that much better with less of the ground, more focus on the tree line. And then I'm not sure if I like this yellow along the edge. It kind of draws the eye over there. So maybe I'm going to bring that in a little, soften that edge. So you can play around with your composition just by your matting, and you get a really different look. So it was just a little tip that I thought I would share because you can do that to play around with how you want to frame it or mat it. So anyway, I just wanted to give that because I never really talked about that before. But you can change it up after the fact, or you can trim it down or anything like that. All right, so in doing this, I decided I wanted to do kind of a wet line and wash, meaning I wanted my ink to be water soluble, and I wanted it to bleed into the project because I wanted this to be a real, old looking cabin and a real kind of cool, it's fall, so it's warm colors, but I also wanted it to feel cold, like the fall, like a fall woods. So I used a water-soluble ink, but you can decide however you want to do it. Some people will paint first and then add the line afterwards and you can use, of course, if you're drawing on it dry, doesn't matter what your ink does. But so some people will do that. They'll just paint first and then add the lines, or they'll put the lines down and then they'll paint, and either they use the water soluble or you can use the permanent ink and those lines stay there, or you can do a mix of permanent and water soluble ink, or you can do drawing before and after the painting. So you can really do a lot of different approach it a lot of different ways, and all of those give you different effects. So decide how you want to do it. You can even use different colors. I don't have to only use black, but I decided to use black, and because I was choosing black, and black of course is not a color, it's a mix of other colors, right? So depending on the ink that you're using, these are I'll get to these pictures in just a little bit, but black ink can break out into other colors. So what I did, and what I would recommend if you have some varieties of black inks like I do, I brought all of my black inks together and I played around with them. So I just wrote what pen it was. I did a little bit of a scribble, and then at the end of all of these, I added water. So on some of these, you can't see where I added water because they're permanent, but then you can see what's the ones that bleed. And you'll notice that some of them, let me bring this down a little bit. Some of them bleed into a blue color. Some of them have like red and grays. And this one was fairly neutral gray color. This one has a little bit of warmth to it, and almost a bit of redness, but not quite. And then this one is a warmer gray, and this one actually purple. That's really purple. So you can see that they all can bleed a little bit differently. So if you are doing it where you want it water soluble, just make sure that you choose the bleeding color that's going to work for whatever you're doing. I did a project, and I was using, I think it was this purple one, and then it got wet, and it really purple didn't go with my color scheme at all. So I didn't mind that it was going to get wet, but I just didn't expect it to be purple. So just know what you're going to get when you wet it. Otherwise, you can use a permanent if you prefer. I decided, let me tell you which one I decided out of all of these. So these are kind of my order that I did. And they're different types of pen. Like this is a fountain pen, and I actually put some India ink in there, and it turns out the India ink turns a little, I thought that would be permanent, and it actually turns a little bit blue. And some bleed a lot more than others. That's the other thing you have to keep in mind too, is some of them activate very easily, and some of them just activate a little bit. So just know what you're getting. Now this one, even though it's called an art pen, this is a Rotring art pen. I had expected it to be a permanent ink because I'm thinking, okay, if you're going to be using it with art, it's actually a little like a fountain pen. I was thinking it was going to be permanent, but it actually turns out to be water soluble. So, but I really liked this one because it creates a fine tip, and it had a bit of a warm color to it when it bled. So that's what I chose. All right. Once you, of course, have the choice of pen, you have to think about what it is you're going to be creating and how much of the pen you want on your page. And you could pre-draw with pencil if you want, but I like to keep things really loose and simple. So I don't. Maybe that's simpler. And you can do a number of things to get that. Now, these are the subjects that I'm using. This is Martha's cabin. This was a cabin that was my great-great-grandmother's. It was built by my grandfather, my great-great-grandfather. And they were gone before me, I think. But the cabin was in our family for a long time. And I'm not even remember. I think it was built in maybe I want to say the 20s. And anyway, it's a kind of a big cabin. It's been built on and, changed over the years, but I loved the red, let me zoom in a little bit. I loved the red window and the red door. So I'm kind of doing a little bit of a mix of things. I like this shape here. So I'm just doing a simple cabin. I'm not doing the whole thing. So I'm going to decide what I want to use and what I don't want to use. So I'm not going to put this little water tank in there. I'm just going to make a simple cabin. I'm moving the window over to the side and then putting a door here and putting Martha's door here. So I'm really making it my own. I love the red roof, so I'm going to be incorporating some of that. And I did that here as well in this one. So I just made a simple shaped cabin. And I do like in both of these compositions. Now this one, I don't have ownership of this. I have the link to the source of this online, so you guys can go to that. But I liked this background, just the idea of this fall woods and the leaves. And so I decided this is sort of the composition I'm using, and I wanted to show that to you. And I also like that it's showing this part of the side of the cabin, not just straight on. This one does as well. There's a little bit of piece of the cabin there. So I like that. I like that side view a little bit, makes it more interesting than just looking at the face of the cabin. So I just wanted to share that. I'm kind of making, this is my setting and this is my cabin kind of combined there. So that's where I'm going. Now, as far as drawing, what you can do if you're not comfortable drawing is you can do tracing, which is where you put some pencil on the back of your printout. You can just, you know, put some pencil and then you can draw your lines. If you really want it to be to match what you're doing, you can just draw your lines, you know, your architectural lines. And then, and I'm not going to do this, this chimney here. So you could do it that way if you want. That's an easy way to transfer. If you're using the same size, you just print it out the size you want, and then you could do it that way. The other thing you could do is just cut it out. You could cut this architectural shape out with your scissors, and you could lay it down and just do a little bit of a tracing around it. That would be another way to do it. The way I did it is I just kind of try to get an idea of where it is, where I want it to go. So typically for composition, this is just general composition rules. You want to put your subject, it's the rule of threes. You want to put your subject in. So what you do is you split up your paper into 3 equal parts, 3 equal parts, 3 equal parts. And then where the intersections are, those, you want your primary element, your subject, to be kind of anchored to one of those. Oops, let me pull this back a little bit. One of those spots. So if you look at this, this is anchored to this area here. It doesn't have to be centered to that, but it should at least go through that section, one of those sections, those cross sections. So that's what I have in mind. I also, you don't want to have your horizon line right in the middle. You want it kind of along like one of the thirds. So you either have a higher horizon or a lower horizon, roughly, you know, using that guideline. And that's just, I mean, there are other guidelines too. And that's not the only option, but that's a general rule of thumb, and it's easy for beginners. So I want my subject roughly over here. And I've decided after doing that other one that I really want to really de-emphasize this foreground and have more trees. This one has quite a bit of the foreground, and I don't want that much. Like, I just want it more, you know, more like that. So it's roughly about, you know, it's roughly like about here, close to the third of the page. So I'm going to start there. I'm just going to roughly sketch. Now, when I say sketch, to be clear, if I draw, I'm going to put my, let me get my ink started here. Okay, if I'm drawing, I might be putting a solid line across, right? But when I'm sketching, I'm just kind of touching and going. I don't want it to be like a straight solid line. Okay, that's not what I'm going to try to do here. In any of my lines, I want them to be very, very light touches. Just touch and go lightly. Okay. I'm not getting a ruler out and drawing a straight line. I really want it to be loose. So I'm roughly just along that horizon line. I'm just kind of laying down a sketch of my horizon line, roughly about a third of page up. Okay. Now, when I'm looking at my image, I'm just going to get the shape using this. I want it to be, I want some space over here. So maybe starting about right here. And you can even, what artists will do is they'll use like a pencil to do sizing. So about that much from the page. So I can even use that, and then from that much from the page, and I'm just going to do a little bit of a mark of where that is. And then I can go back and even look at, okay, how tall is this? If I'm making it the same size of this as this, I can even, you know, kind of get an idea how high this line is, right? So I can put that in and just, I mean, it doesn't have to be exactly that. And I'm just sketching that line. And I can, if I want it to be the same size as this, I can look at the front from here to here, and I can measure it. Just, and again, you can just eyeball, but if you want to get it as close, you can. So here's the front, the width of this cabin, if I'm following this guideline. My other one's smaller, I think, but, and then I can even look to see, oh, is that about the same? Oh yeah, that looks the same size. Okay. So I'm just going to look over here where that is and just pop that in. Okay. Now I'm looking at the roof line, and I can look at this angle. Not only am I looking at how long this is, but I'm also looking at this angle. And if I put this on here, now you'll notice this goes all the way to the end, including the side wall, but it's pretty much a straight line. If I look at this line, visually, it's pretty straight. So I'm just gonna, yeah, it's pretty straight. So I'm just gonna run it all the way there, because I'm going to have a little bit of that overhang. So I'm going to measure. Keep my hand angled right. And because I don't want to lose that angle, right? So I'm holding it there. I'm moving this out of the way, and I'm putting it right there. And this is where it's going to start. And put my finger there. I'm marking here and to the middle. And then I can connect the dots. Loosely, loosely. And it's going to be this, you know, pretty much the same angle over here. Again, I'm going to go up to that middle. It's about that long to the middle. So about that long. Right there. I can kind of put a dot there, and then I can even move this to sketch it, because maybe it's hard to draw the straight line from that angle, which it is for me. So, all right, so I'm just using this as the guide, roughly. And you'll notice that there's no view of the roof, the top of the roof. So I don't have to even worry about that. This one, it's a little bit different angle. You can see some of the roof, but I'm not going to worry about that. I'm kind of using this as my guide for that. All right, and then I can decide, okay, I want to have a door. Now, this door is actually in a weird location because it's beyond the subfloor. So it's a little bit lower. And so just recognizing that the door would probably start, you know, more like here. That's the subfloor. So it would come up a little bit, almost, you know, almost as high as this roof line where this is, but it's not going to be as high on this guy. So I'm going to say, I'm just going to roughly put something in, maybe a couple logs below the roof line. And I'm going to make it like it's framed, and I'm just touching in some of my pigment. Let me bring this closer. And then I want a window. And again, this is just rough sketch. Doesn't have to be perfect. But I need to do these first because I want to put in the logs, and I need to know where those the door and window are, because once I start with the logs, then of the cabin, then I have to stop where those are, right? So now I'm just gonna draw some, or I should say sketch, some horizontal lines. I want to stay in the same row roughly, but I don't want to draw a line all the way across. I'm just gonna kind of touch and go roughly the same distance, just horizontal. And I'm just moving my whole arm. I'm not pivoting, because otherwise you're going to make, if you pivot, either your wrist or your arm from your elbow, you're going to make an arc. So I'm sliding across the page, moving my whole arm so that I'm getting it more straight. Doesn't have to be perfect, because a lot of these lines are gonna soften once we add the paint. So just some horizontal lines. Now, over here on this side, we have this sidewall. It's not going to be, you know, it's going to go back here a little bit at an angle from the front. So it's just paying attention to some of those elements. So it's really going back at an angle, and it's going to be shorter. So that's the sidewall. And I can use this to get my angle and my distance if I need to. And then you're connecting the dots from the bottom of that. That's going to all be kind of lost anyway, in shadow and stuff, but it doesn't matter. Now I'm filling in a little bit more of the roof, because I want my roof line to be in shadow, and I want that bleeding to be a little bit heavier, because it's going to be darker right below the roof line. So I'm just adding a little bit more of the ink there to let it bleed. And there's a couple little like studs that go up. Those aren't really going to be that visible, but I'm just kind of getting an idea. And then the side isn't going to be that visible because it's a lot in shadow, but I see a few little lines here. It's kind of going back perspective. But again, those are going to be kind of lost in the shadows in the end. All right, so I think there should be maybe, I don't know, maybe this is some steps going up. I don't know. I didn't put steps in the other one. And then I'm just going to put some little like plants around. I'm going to, oh, I think I want a little chimney just off the top. There's not one on either of my pictures, so I'm just going to kind of make my own. Doesn't have to be perfect, because there's got to be something burning, some, you know, some smoke or something. I don't know. There might be smoke. A little window on the door. And then I want maybe a little pine or something here. But I have to think about now when I'm doing the foliage, how much do I want this pen to be in my foliage? How high do I want it to go up to bleed? See, I had it going all the way up. So that's what you need to decide. Maybe you want to do one side of a tree so that you have a shadow side of a bark. You don't have to decide everything up front, but you just need to be aware that that's going to bleed. So I do want, I really like this tree that's coming out the side here of Martha's cabin. So I want to create that effect, just bringing up some scraggly branches, and doesn't have to be too perfect. Just saying, oh, there's some old dead trees. And I can fill in whatever of the story I want later too. But I just want to tell the story that there's some old trees back here and they're kind of dead. Some of the branches are, or, you know, that might be not completely dead, but it's just really the branches you're going to see. So I want a few of those in there. And then I want a pine tree kind of there. I'm just putting a little bit of the story. And then over here, I'm going to have some taller trees. I'm going to have different size trees. I'm just putting the bases in. Maybe I'll put a little bit of a round tree. That's a big tree. I'm just loosely putting some, and I don't want them all like equidistant. And I'm not telling the whole story. I'm just saying, oh, there's some trees in there. And really, I'm just dancing around. Look, I'm just telling, oh, there's random trees. And I can fill in the rest of the story later, so I don't necessarily have to tell everything right now. And as far as the front goes, I mean, I can, I just want it really sort of some loose landscape. Maybe that there's a road here. There's, you know, leaves and things. Maybe the road, but I don't know yet, but I'm just putting a little bit just to balance it out. And then I still have some room for sky that doesn't have the ink in it. Yeah. All right, so that's all I'm going to do with my ink right now. And then I can, like I said, I can add and fill in and do whatever I want after, but I don't want to have too much because that's going to bleed in and I have to decide how much of that gray I want to show up. So for now, I'm going to let that be. And if your cabin's a little wonky, I'll have to tell you, old buildings can be wonky. So don't worry about it. Don't worry about if it's not perfectly vertical or if it's leaning or if it's I mean, look at this. This is kind of asymmetrical. I don't know what's going on over there, but it certainly doesn't look straight. Old buildings can be a little bit wonky. So let it be what it is. Don't judge it if it's not what you imagined it to be, and just wait. It'll look better and better as you start to add some stuff, hopefully. Okay. The first thing I want to do is I want to put in some of my sky color. So I'm just gonna, my bigger areas, I'm gonna do my sky and my foreground, my lightest colors. So I'm just gonna use a little bit of some cobalt. I want it to be a fall cold sky. And I'm using the M-gram. Most of these are M-grams. I think there's might be a couple exceptions, but this is my color palette. I try to narrow it down a little bit of the colors that I have. And I'm going to use a lot of these earth tones, maybe some Payne's gray, some indigo, and yeah, pretty much yellow ochre, raw sienna, burnt umber, raw umber. I'm going to be just tapping in a bit of each of these. And then as a shadow or a contrast complementary color, I'm going to use maybe some indigo and Payne's gray. Payne's gray has a little bit more black to it. This is more blue. And then some of the Hooker's green. So if you're wanting to figure out what colors, but you can kind of mix, whatever you want. For my sky, I'm doing some cobalt, but I'm going to probably mix in a little bit of maybe some raw sienna in there and maybe even a little bit of indigo to soften it up. So make it a little bit cooler sky, because cobalt's kind of a brighter blue. Hi, just a little reminder to please hit the subscribe or like button or comment. Back to the program. Thanks. And I want to kind of dilute it because I'm doing a light wash of it. I'm not trying to get a lot of bright color. So I just want to lay some color down, and watercolor always dries lighter. So even though it looks fairly blue on the page, it's not going to be that blue in it. And I'm trying not to touch too much of the trees at this point. I want to just kind of dance around those trees a little bit, just to get a little bit of blue in. Now I'm going to bring in some of my, I think it was the raw sienna, or maybe actually burnt. I think burnt sienna is a little bit redder. I'm just going to bring that in to kind of gray it out a little bit, gray out that. I don't want everything grayed out, but I just want to, I don't want it to be such a warm sky. And now I'm going to bring in some yellow ochre. And see how it's moving that pigment? That's okay. So this is roughly the tree line here where I put some of that yellow, because I want that to be, that's the lightest color of my tree line. And while this is still wet, I'm gonna dab out some clouds out of that, just subtle clouds, because it's already starting to dry a little bit, but it just gives a little bit of movement in that sky. And then I'm going to drop in a little bit of some raw sienna. And I'm dropping it in while it's still wet because I want it to move that color around. I'm not putting it everywhere. I'm just dropping it in. And then I'm going to bring it down a little bit lower. All right, I'm going to take that yellow ochre and I'm going to bring it into the foreground. And I did a little bit of dry brushing, just kind of mucking around. I left a little bit of white. I want some highlights left in there. Just dancing the brush around. Now I'm dropping in a little bit of that sienna. Now for the low tree line, I think I'm going to put some more. I want to keep this a little bit cooler. So I think I'm going to bring in some of that burnt umber. And then I'm tapping it into the upper trees too. All right, let's visit this little cabin. I'm going to start with my yellow ochre again. I might mix a little bit of the raw sienna. So raw sienna and yellow ochre. And I want my brush to be pretty, I want it to be saturated with color, but I don't want it dripping because I'm going to be doing some detail and I don't want it putting too much moisture where I'm going, because I'm going to try to, I don't want to fill this in. I want to do log by log. So I just want to be careful, trying to dab off the sides so I don't drip. So I'm just going to go in and I'm going to follow right along those lines so I can pick up that the ink and get it to bleed. And then I'm going to go along that roof line. Look how dark, yummy that is. And this side is going to be my shadow side. So it's going to be pretty dark in there. So while I have that pretty dark colors on there, I'm just going to tap in some colors there. I don't really need to have too many highlights in there because that's really going to be mostly in shadow, but I'm going to do it in layers. And then around my door, around my window. Just getting that ink activated. Now, some ink will activate one time, and then once it dries, it won't continue to reactivate. And I'm not sure about this one. I mean, if there are areas that haven't been activated, that's not the case, but you know, those are going to activate. But sometimes, just like the Inktense pencils, once they've been activated and wet and they dry, they become permanent. So some inks are like that, and that could be the case for this. It's not going to move quite as much. Now I'm going to bring in a little more, I think a little more of the raw sienna color mixed with the raw umber. So a little bit of the raw sienna and raw umber. Just touching it in, not drawing a line. I'm kind of sketching with the brush as well, just touching. I don't want the color everywhere. Now I'm going to clean my brush and I'm going to have it real damp, but not wet. And I'm just going to soften that. I'm bringing down that white because it's a little bit wet already. So I'm just, with pretty much just a really lightly damp brush, just toning down the color a little bit. It's going to move that pigment just a little bit. So we're starting to get some dimension with that. Okay, I'm going to let that sit for a little bit and work some more into the tree line. I want to get some green in there. Not a ton of green because it's fall, but I just want to tell a story that there's, you know, there's evergreens in there too. So sometimes those stay green because they're evergreens. This is an evergreen here. And I want some of these little like bushes around to be a little green. And some foliage down at the bottom. So just a little bit of some green in there. Not everything turns out to be gold. Plus it's more interesting if there's some color. I'm also going to tap in a little bit more of my burnt sienna because that's kind of got some red tones in it. So I want to bring up some of the red because that's the good contrast for that green. Get some more. I'm just touching it in. There's not really like a clear direction. I gotta bring down that background there. Let's see. Coming back. I want this. I don't want there to be like a big white frame around it. I don't mind a little bit, but there we go. All right, so now it's looking like a bunch of different trees going on, different colors. different types of trees. I also want to bring this a little bit, soften that white. There we go. And I like to have in my shadow line down here, I like to put in just to kind of bring a little bit of shadow and weight to the lower part of the forest. I'm going to bring in a little bit of some indigo. And I'm going to bring some of the shadow up, but I don't want to go too crazy with it. Just tapping it in a few spots to tie that in, but I want to keep the weight down low, not high up in the trees. All right, I'm going to work on, I think this is dry now. I move around because I want to let certain areas dry before I go into them again, because I want to work dry on dry. So I'm going to work a little bit on the door. I want it to be kind of a sort of a rusty, warm red, not quite brown. So I'm going to bring in my pyrrole. I don't know, cadmium deep white. These are my red choices. You know what, I'm going to try that cadmium deep this time. Last time I did the pyrrole, but I'm going to try this mixed with a little bit of my burnt sienna and see what that looks like. I want it subdued. I'm not trying to do a bright red. This is a weathered door. And I'm not putting, I'm putting a light shade, it's diluted. I'm not putting a heavy concentrated yet because I'm going to build the layers. So just dropping in some color. And then for my windows, I kind of want them to have a little coolness to them. So I'm going to bring in my Payne's Gray. Touch a little bit of that in there, just to kind of give the idea of glass. Or it's dark. It's not nighttime, so it's kind of dark inside. Can't really see what's in there. All right, and maybe I'll bring in some more shapes in here. Just kind of making an interesting tree line. Kind of want maybe a little more height over there. I'm going to mix this raw sienna and yellow ochre. Bring the tree line up a little bit over there. Just make it kind of interesting. So you just play around and you're looking at shapes, and just like the tree shapes. What shapes do you like? You're not trying to, you don't want it to be real obvious what it is. You want to just give the story that it's a tree, but it doesn't have to be like too specific. It's like, oh, there's just a bunch of different trees in there. So that's the story I'm telling. And you can see that we lost a lot of our line drawing over here. It just kind of blended in. There's a little bit peeking through, and that's okay. That's okay. It added to that sort of the shadowy story. All right, now I'm going to go back into, it's pretty dry. And I'm going to go in with just a little bit of indigo, and I want to dry brush it. So I want it to be really like pigment, but very little water. And I'm going to be taking the brush and going to the side very lightly from the edges and just dry brush a little bit of that blue to kind of add some shadow. That's even too much. I want like really, I just want it to kind of touch the paper, the texture of the paper and create some more texture. I don't know how to explain that while I'm doing it, but I want it to be really like rough, and I don't want it everywhere. I just want to touch it in a little bit here and there. And I want to do that again with some of my darkest, my raw umber. Okay, I'm going to try to do that again. Oh, too much water. If it starts to move too much pigment, it's too much water. Okay, really just trying to make this look older and older. And then I'm going to bring some of that in to go into that side shadow side. And just really darken that up. And along the roof line, I'm going to bring it down a little bit further to make it shadows of from the roof, to show that the roof is overhanging a little bit. And I do want to, at some point, I have to let that dry, but I do want to get that red roof. I want to bring in some red, and I don't know if I made it too dark to do that, but I'm going to try. I'm going to see what I can do. All right. Don't like this, like harsh line. So I'm going to actually try to lift up some color, maybe. There we go. If it's too much, the shape is too solid and you don't like it, you could always, lift some highlights. That's the great thing about watercolor. And I might even add some little scratching. My credit card, corner of my credit card, I can go in and create some, wherever it's still a little damp, it'll lift up some of that pigment, make some sticks. And I still want to bring down some of the white. I don't want the white to be so white. So I don't have any pigment on my brush, just a very, really almost dry, just enough to loosen a little bit of the pigment so that it brings down the whites just a little bit. Okay, I'm gonna play around with that door, make it a little bit more red again. I kind of bounce around. I see something, I go, oh, that needs work. And then depending on if it's dry or not and ready to be worked. Leaving a little bit of that under highlights, but not all of it. And then I think I want to make this a little bit red around here too. The window. And I'm going to try to bring some of this red into the roof line as well. Now this roof, the front of the roof goes to here, right? So this is where the overhang extends. So I'm not going to go, I'm going to be careful that I don't take it all the way down, because I'm really seeing the front of the roof line. And from the side, I can't see as much. So there, it's not too bright. There's a lot of light over here. I think I want to tone that down a little bit. See how it looks like there's light emanating from here? I don't want that to be light. So I'm just toning it down with some I'm just looking for shapes I like, shapes I don't like, balance. So this is where it's just like finding your, what works for you to touch in. Now I'm still going to be adding some more of the line after it dries. And I'm still going to do some splatter in the front, kind of to look like leaves and things there. So I'm just looking to see if there's anything that needs to be kind of repaired before that. Because that's gonna, I think I want to soften this. I don't like how these two shapes are kind of really hard lined, so I'm just gonna try to soften that a little bit. Okay, that's better. And I still feel like the whites are too white in this, so I'm just gonna, with the pretty dry brush, soften. There, that's a little better. I don't think I want this white right there. So now I'm just toning down where I don't want those highlights. Okay. All right. I think I'm going to pause there and just dry it and then play around with some line work. So let me just get this dry. Okay. Now I'm going to go back in with my, now you can see that even though I'm kind of doing the same inspirational picture, they turn out every time I do it, it's a little different. I mean, this is a different, different feel than that. So, it's different every time. And that's part of, I think, the fun of it is with watercolor, it's always going to do something a little bit different each time. So I'm going to just go in here and maybe bring in some lines back. I don't want it to be, I don't want to just start making stripes. I'm just trying to tie in a little bit. Just make it interesting. Like I'm not even drawing out like a full tree. It's just I'm making branches here and there. Just, random twigs. Just because you wouldn't see all of the twigs. And some of them are kind of floating and some of them connect things to the ground. So and I can even bring back in some of the lines of the cabin if I want. But I'm just not, like I said, I'm not doing, I'm just sketching, just dropping in little hints. Just subtle. And you can even bring in highlights with a white gel pen. I'm going to add some of that. I have a white pen handy. No, actually, I did want to bring back some of my window. I don't want too many. But if you lost all your contrast, you know, you could bring in a little bit of some highlight areas with the gel pen. And I think I want a little bit of these steps here. All right, I'm going to block off maybe just my cabin. And I want to put some splatter in. I'm just blocking off the areas I don't want splattered. I'll start with some Payne's gray, pretty dark. Burnt sienna. I don't want it in the sky. It is getting a little bit in the sky. Let's put some more coverage on the sky. I'm going wild here. And then if I want it to look kind of like, you know, leaves are more subtle, I can always kind of push down and that'll soften the color a little bit, you know, if I put it down and then dab it. So it'll smash a little bit and lighten it. So if you want to make various ranges, you can do that. And then if there's anything that you don't like this, I didn't really want to make quite that pattern. I can always, better to do it while it's wet, but I can soften it. I say, oh, that's kind of a weird pattern. Break it up a little, break up the party. All righty. I think I'm gonna call it there. We have time for some show and tell. Thank you everyone for joining me for another episode of Mini Masterpiece Watercolor Workshop. As always, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share if you find my content helpful. And as always, happy creating and happy painting. Bye.